You are listening to The Central Cast, a podcast for mystics and misfits just like you, recorded every week in Pasadena, California, before a live audience. Thanks for tuning in.
I'll try standing. How's that? Radical. Good morning. There's a story from the book of Luke that I actually really like, and I'm going to read it to you this morning. I've sort of freely translated it, but there are parts of it that are strictly from most versions of the text, and that'll be important in a moment. So in the story, there's this rich man, and he dresses in purple and fine linen, and he feasts sumptuously every day. And at his gate, there is a poor man named Lazarus. And Lazarus is sick. He's covered in sores, and he is starving. And he stays at the rich man's gate, hoping to be given some leftovers from the lavish feasts, and he sees the caterers going in and out every day as he waits, and no food ever comes to him. The dogs come and they lick his sores, and Lazarus just grows weaker and weaker, and the rich man grows fatter and fatter. And then Lazarus dies. And when he dies, he's carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. And then the rich man also dies, and he goes to hell, where he's tormented in both body and mind. And in all of that pain, he lifts his eyes and he sees something far away. He sees Abraham, the patriarch, and he sees Lazarus by his side. And he calls out, "Father Abraham, have mercy. Send Lazarus to dip his finger in water to cool my tongue. I'm in agony in this fire." But Abraham says, "Child, remember that in your lifetime, you got the good things and Lazarus got the bad things. It's not like that here. Here, he's consoled and you're below, tormented by fire, and that's just the way it is. Bye, guys." So this is probably one of the most broadly censored stories in all of Scripture. It is censored not only in the 5 most widely read translations of the Bible, but also in the New Revised Standard Version, which tends to be the preferred version in progressive seminaries and so-called progressive churches. And in each of those translations, it's censored in exactly the same way. And this censorship is not what you might think. The censorship has nothing to do with tempering the message about caring for the poor. And it has nothing to do with how billionaires will be doomed to burn in the fire, in a fate written by their very own lack of empathy. Right? Does anyone have any idea what part of this story then is censored? Please, if you went to seminary, don't raise your hand. Although I didn't learn this in seminary. Any ideas? What part of the story is censored? This story is in the Bible, yes. Luke. You know what? I did not write down the verse, but I can get it to you. I promise it's there. I was like, wow, Abe, I'm impressed. So it's not easy to think about what other part of the story would be censored. So what's censored is the description of the physical relationship between Lazarus and Abraham. You probably didn't even notice a physical relationship between Lazarus and Abraham, and I think that's probably the point. In the versions that I was drawing from, Lazarus is described as in heaven with Abraham and then by Abraham's side. And there's not much to look at there. And I think that was the point. Because in the original Greek, it says, Lazarus was carried into the bosom of Abraham. The rich man looked up and saw Abraham and Lazarus in his bosom. And the Greek word here that has led to so much censorship is kolpon, Kolpon, which means bosom, chest, breast. It can also describe a position of bodies where one person is reclining with his head on the other person's breast. Or it can refer to the extra fabric of a tunic that you kind of take over and tuck in to make a pocket, for instance, to secure a young child. So the image in the original Lucan text is of one man nurturing another man the way that a mother nurtures a child. It is of one man resting with another man in a position that connotes trust and vulnerability. Or it is the vision of one man caring for another man, tucking him, perhaps metaphorically, into his garment so he feels safe, protected, and loved. These are the images that centuries of Bible translators have deemed so threatening that they have to literally be cut from the text. Images of male intimacy, friendship, vulnerability. These are the threats in a text where men rape, murder, own slaves, commit human sacrifice, commit genocide, torment, and crucify. And the contrast is right there in the passage itself. It's righteous for Abraham to show no mercy as a man literally burns alive in agony for eternity, but it is absolutely unacceptable for two men to find comfort in one another. Male intimacy is the thing that literally cannot be written. It has to be taken out of the text, out of existence, but male violence and cruelty are required and natural. And the book we're talking about, in case you forgot, is the Bible, right? This is a text that people look to tell them how to act and be in the world. It's a book that increasingly is referred to make laws and establish norms about what a man is and what a woman is. A book increasingly being used to police those very same norms against people who would violate them. And I use the word increasingly twice there on purpose because I think it's important for us to know that it was not always this way. Like, gender roles have not been the same since the beginning of time, right? There has not been like a straight line, leading to some end. It's been like this. Gender has been in flux for all of human history. For instance, in my research on this Greek word, kolpon, I found one translation that did not censor the word, that did not police gender. That version was the King James Version, written in 1611, which does refer to Abraham's bosom. Isn't that interesting? For you literature geeks out there, 1611 was also the year that Macbeth first debuted at the Globe Theatre. And that very much is a play about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. So imagine, what would happen if translators just left that Greek word alone? How dangerous could it possibly be to have an image of tenderness between men? How dangerous could it possibly be to have an image of vulnerability and nurturing between two men? How dangerous could it be to suggest that, even just in the kingdom of God, at least, the kind of nurturing found at a woman's breast could also be found at a man's breast? Very dangerous. Very, 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 very dangerous. The entire project of gender norms, not to mention compulsory heterosexuality, relies on men and women being fundamentally different. And not just different, right? Just different doesn't serve the agendas of power. Men must be superior, strong, unemotional but somehow angry enough to kill and rape. And women must be not those things. Inferior, weak, super emotional, but also somehow passive enough to submit. So no, we cannot have the hero Lazarus in a vulnerable embrace with another man. We cannot have Father Abraham, the patriarch, offering nurture at his breast. We cannot have any suggestion that one man's feelings for another man might be similar to how women are supposed to feel. We cannot have that because what we absolutely must have is a binary, right? We must have this binary, this horrible binary that is like a border set down around our bodies, between our bodies and the frontiers where we might otherwise freely explore who we are, who we love, how we feel, and how we want to live our lives. And this binary, of course, I don't need to say it, historically privileges men. We saw an egregious mark of this week as the duly elected and by evangelicals anyway, widely adored leader of the free world turned to a journalist and said, "Quiet, piggy." And no one intervened. Every woman in this room has been told that actually her job is to shut up, look pretty, and let the men do their thing. It's a headline this week because the president said it, but we've all been pointed at and said, "Quiet, piggy." So, yes, the gender binary gives power to men, but at the same hand that gives that power takes something away. Because when men feel that they have to conform to this binary, their emotional lives are reduced. Their compassion remains untapped. Their inner lives are circumscribed by all the things that it is not okay for a man to do or a man to stay and still be considered a man. And this hurts men and it hurts everyone. And this is what gendering does as we know it. It grants and withholds power, but in everything it does, humanity is diminished. So I started out talking about the mistranslation of a particular word and its effects on a text that has enormous influence. But in my experience, all gendering is an act of mistranslation. Gendering takes the original selfhood given to us by God and misshapes it. It requires conformity. For trans and non-trans folks alike, being readily legible as male or female requires taking who you really feel you are and morphing it, translating it into something else. And especially for younger folks, the binary short circuits a whole process of discovery in favor of just conforming, clicking in to one side of the binary or the other. It requires that we not freely explore our own authentic thoughts and feelings and style. It requires taking that authentic you and translating it into an expectation, a history, a tradition. Gender is a mistranslation of the self. And I know that with current events right now, there's a lot of hand-wringing about that it's a fad for younger generations to come out as trans or non-binary. I don't know if you've heard this. I've heard this. It's a fad, right? Then there's lots of concerns about kids getting gender conforming or gender affirming surgery. And you know what? I don't even get into all of that. I'm going to leave all of that to the families and their doctors. And I think the politicians and the lawmakers should also get the F out of the way. But I will say this from my admittedly very removed but interested point of view, here's what I see in the younger generation. They're tired of being told who they are and who they can be. That's how I see it. I think it's a kind of revolution of resistance to binaries in general, gender being one. I think they're just not having it anymore. They're tired of these limited options. From the moment they were born, from the moment they were in the womb, the propaganda machine of gender bears down on them and bears down on their parents, right? Dresses or pants? Do we paint the nursery pink or blue, or, do we buy a Barbie or GI Joe? Like a kitchen set or a truck. I mean, this is dumb, right? I mean, and I see in the younger generations just a resistance to having their bodies colonized by language and clothing and gestures and preferences and bathrooms and sports teams before they can even talk or think for themselves, much less know what they believe. And so, what if we just let them be? What if we just let people explore who they are in their essence without all this pressure to pick a side? I tend to pay close attention to language, and I've been sort of amateurly studying the ways of speaking of people under 30, because there are some things that they do that at first I was like, that doesn't make sense. These people need to be educated. Who's not teaching them logic? Okay. And okay, I admit that, because there's a particular pattern that I'm noticing in the way that they describe reality. They use "and" a lot more than they use "but." And I mean that both actually linguistically and then conceptually, right? They will assert 2 truths, 3 truths, whatever, as existing in tandem at the same time, where my mind initially sees a logical contradiction that I want to correct. My mind wants to cross one of these things out, but theirs doesn't. They err on the side of multiplicity. They add on. And sometimes it drives me crazy, because I just think, no, those 2 things you haven't lived long enough. Those 2 things can't exist at the same time. You got to pick a side. And other times, and increasingly, I think it's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. It's like they have mastered nuance, and paradox is just natural to them, where 2 things seem to contradict, but actually they reveal a deeper truth if you just look closer. Nuance and paradox reveal the multiplicity and complexity of the meanings and perspectives in the world. It's just the height of my talk. Anyway, so theirs seems to be a way of thinking that isn't driven by argument or picking sides, but about there being enough spaciousness in the world for many truths and many people and many paths to exist. And I think it's really beautiful. I listened to an episode of We Can Do Hard Things recently. Does anyone know this? Yeah. So it's Glennon Doyle and Abby Wambach, and they were interviewing Melissa Etheridge and the Indigo Girls. And just side note for me, I was like, what a time to be alive! All these women, they're out and they're powerful and they're talking to one another, and I get to listen in, and I was like, whew. Okay. So there was this moment where Glennon asked a question of these musicians about what they would say to the younger generation of artists coming up right now. And Emily Saliers, who's one half of the Indigo Girls, immediately turned that around and started talking about what they were learning from the younger artists that are coming up, like Katie Gavin. And I'll never forget how Emily summarized the younger generation. She said, they just cannot conceive of leaving anyone behind. And that is a spacious, inclusive, non-binary, abundant way of being in the world that I would call an image of the kingdom of God. So I'm curious this morning, small as we are, that might serve us, because I want to talk about gender. I want to talk about the role of gender in our lives. Or even, if you don't want to talk about your own life, what you think about gender as a concept, right? And maybe how religion has been a part of that for you. Obviously, I have a certain perspective on gender. In my experience, I feel like the gender binary is a social construct, and that's not to diminish anyone who feels like, they fully identify with male or female, but just to say that there are powers in the world that work on us to think specific things about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. But I want to have this conversation because I also think that no matter what our experiences are, even if we all have a totally different experience, or even if, I stop talking and you all are like, Julie, the gender binary is the greatest thing that's ever happened to humanity. What are you talking about? I think it's still so amazing to talk about gender, because I think talking about it just makes the world a little bit freer and a little bit safer. Every time we talk openly about gender, we can loosen the grip of this idea that if you're born a certain way or people identify you in a certain way, then there's a certain way you absolutely have to be and certain things that you can't be. By interrogating and denaturalizing something, we can kind of free ourselves or free others from it. So I just want to open it up. Thoughts. What does it mean to you to be who you identify as, whether it's she, he, they, whatever pronouns you use? And also, is gender just something that doesn't seem to affect you at all? Yeah, Dorian.
I think the identity of gender has always been an odd thing for me to know how to feel about it. I was born in Spain, so I was around a lot more frilly men who were comfortable with their, their femininity. And then I moved to Texas, which, you only drive.
Wow.
You're only a man if you drive a truck and I don't know, drink beer, I guess. I don't right. And the wild thing is that people believe that.
Yeah.
I remember trying, having crushes on, on certain young ladies, and then it's like they were like, I thought you were gay, and I was like, okay, why? And they were just like, well, you don't come off like the other guys, right? It's kind of like, okay, well, I'm here now.
Just to clarify.
but and I think just in general, and I think image can have a lot of, I'm a bigger guy, right? My voice register is on the lower end, so I think it's weird because a lot of times when I encounter people, it's like they don't know what to do with me, and it's not. And I'm a fairly boring conventional person, right? So it's always been odd for me whenever I meet people who they don't even have to be that far into the binary or structured around it, but it's to put people off and for them to be confused about how what do I do with him? How do I talk to him? Right.
Yeah.
And I think I've gotten to a level of comfort, in the last decade where it's just, I like who I am and very comfortable with that. And, I was having a conversation with Joaquin last night. He was talking about a young girl who's making fun of him because he likes rainbows. And then she's like, and you you like unicorns too. And there's a part of me where I was just like, what's the problem? Like, what's wrong with like rainbows and unicorns, right? And and I think I think just as a person in society, my goal in general, like initially with anyone and everyone that I try to encounter and meet, is to make them feel comfortable, right? Not that it's like my job or anything like that, right? But to essentially provide them with a safe space to be them, right? However, whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so sad how you were saying that, that women, even though it's, and its ups and downs in terms of gender binary structure and everything like that, it's so sad how women have to essentially claw their way out of these, like, these assigned trenches, right?
Yeah.
And then at the same time, it's so sad how men just feel like, you know, also that they have to conform to something and then, like, treat each other the way they do, and then even women do it as well, right? And it's so sad.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad, and this is me speaking from a place where, I've had the support of others and, the kindness of others to finally get to a place where I'm like, I like who I am, and I'm very comfortable with that, and you can fuck off.
Yeah. 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 Thank you so much. Okay.
Good morrow.
Good.
Thank you for the topic. I am 90% convinced that most straight men have partners so they can enjoy things. And what I mean by that is I was at a concert, as one does. I was at an Usher concert, and there was a guy sitting in front of me, and, you know, he was texting his friend. His friend's like, "Where are you?" He's like, "I'm at Usher." And his friend's like, basically like, "What are you doing there?" And he's like, "I'm here with my girl." And I was like, he loves Usher, but like he gets
Yep.
to use this front of having I'm here with my girl, so I can be at Usher. But I was like, he 99% wants to be there himself, or he would have just sent her with her friends, right? And I think about that all the time, how it seems so often like straight guys can't just enjoy things, but just to piggyback on what was already said. I also just wanted to say, the under 30s, as a parent of an under 30, as a Gen Zer, you know, they got some good coaching. So I just wanted to put that out there
Oh,
as well.
yeah.
So
Go, Mom.
credit where credit is due, if you will. They didn't get
Yeah.
there by themselves. But yeah, I think it is fascinating to think about, because it is. I mean, it is a construct, right? And what we understand gender to be, and even thinking about the toys, like, there have been all these studies about how book covers have become more gendered, so that you have pink books and not
Oh,
pink
wow.
books. And the Barbie aisle, the girls' aisle of toys is pink. It's a very different, and there's old Lego ads where it's young girls playing Lego, but it's not a Polly Pocket. Like, it's just regular Lego. So this increase in the binary, as you were saying, it's a real thing. I forgot what I was just about to say about that. The binary, the toys, the Lego, just enjoying things. And I taught a class many years ago about where I basically just assigned all women written books. It was a YA class. And the guys in the class said they didn't care about reading the books. They just hated that the covers were pink. So that was the biggest deterrent. They didn't want to read them because they're pink. And there's even been studies of the boom in romance novels since Kindles came out. And I think and a large part of it is
Because there's no cover.
there's no cover and nobody knows what you're reading. So anyway, and I mean, that goes, a friend and I were just talking yesterday too about, the other day, she's like, I can't believe I like light pink. That's so basic and girly, and I don't want to be associated with those things. And that happens too. So, as you were saying, it hurts us all.
I always hated pink. And yet in the last 5 years, I started to like pink. And I felt that, like, you can't like pink. That's not who you are. but I wanted some pink in my life. Yeah.
Maybe more like a sidebar, but you're talking about Abraham's bosom.
Yeah.
The wonderful essay called "Now I Lay Me Down to Eat" about different dining customs. And in most biblical meals, people are laying down around the table, reclining on their side. And it become an issue with the Last Supper because of John, the disciple that Jesus loved, reclines on Jesus, basically on his bosom, just like Abraham's bosom. And so they haven't known what to do in depicting the Last Supper because they've got everybody sitting around the table, and it's unnatural to see what John does.
Right.
And I think the other thing that came to mind for me is you're talking about people using and. And I think that's a big thing because we talk so much about connection. And most of our uses of connection imply something like a close fit, something that comes together exactly. But conjunction, which is what and does, it brings two things that are different alongside each other that may not necessarily connect fully.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what we need to learn to live with, is how to say and come alongside people we may not necessarily connect with.
Yeah.
You know?
Thank you.
So I really appreciated all of that.
I had when I was in CPE, our CPE supervisor would stop us every time we used the word but. It was annoying as hell. But after 4 or 5 weeks of that, my brain did start to change a little bit to where, I might say, I'm friends with Rusty, but I'm also friends with Ellie because there's a large age difference between Rusty and this little Ellie, not you. Right? And how is it different if I say I'm friends with Rusty and Ellie? Right? That means that there's no like elemental tension there between being friends with an older person and a very young person. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. Do you want?
I was just going to say, with what Akila was sharing, I totally understand that. As an unapologetic Avril Lavigne fan, I've been to a couple Avril Lavigne shows, and never with a woman, with my buddy Gary, and I just assume everybody assumed that we were going to an Avril Lavigne concert together. I know, but I think these things are so. You're right. They're so impressed on us because, Dorian, like you were saying, little kids don't care. They don't understand. I remember being a little kid and having My Little Ponies, which is like a big deal in the 80s. Yeah. But thankfully it wasn't for my parents. And my mom's like, great, you want a My Little Pony? You can have My Little Ponies. But, would I have done that being older and understanding that? Probably not. Yeah. And that's crazy. We're talking about toys and things that you like to do that are just, you don't even know that it's happening to you. So I really appreciate what you were sharing.
And why would you not like a unicorn? I mean, I get it. I totally understand the gendering of that, but it's a horse with a, why would you not? That's just, and a rainbow. I mean, that's just a miracle. I mean, but like you say, little kids don't care, but that little girl's parents, like, what did they tell her, Akila?
Yeah, last thing. Also thinking about that, my friend's son, he was always watching the My Little Pony cartoons that just came out. And it was funny because I remember thinking, oh, you let him, I think it's great that she lets him watch it. You know what I mean? Like that. Because even I was surprised because there is a lot of, what is he doing playing with dolls, or what is he doing doing these things? And I knew a young woman who, because like the little baby dolls, and they with the carriage and the the thing. And so her brother always had one, she said. Her brother always had one. And and she said as she got older, she realized that's why her brother was always so nurturing and caring with kids. And she was like, more guys should do that because then they learn how to take care of something.
Yeah.
But again, that's baby dolls
Yeah.
are seen as girl things only.
Yeah.
And so that was also just a fascinating thinking about the toy stuff.
Yeah.
The toys are always the thing.
The toys.
Anyway.
I will say finally, just as in total transparency, one thing I've loved about being a girl is I've had some epic nights of walking into bars and smoking everybody at pool. Because all of the stereotypes are like, you can't do angles. I don't know what the breast gets in the way, which honestly it kind of does sometimes. But so, like, full disclosure, that's the one time I can think that the stereotype has actually like worked for me and been really fun. But thank you all for this discussion. It was I really appreciate you opening up about your lives. And let's read our benediction together. So let's read together. As we go from this place, we commit ourselves to the path of love, honesty, and humility. We dedicate ourselves as Christ did to the cause of justice and the courageous embrace of this life, this world, and each other. Amen. Yay.
Thanks for listening in on this week's edition of the Central Cast. Hope you enjoyed it and hope you join us next time. Bye-bye.